Isolated within the somber northern forests of the Czech Republic, Houska Castle is a 13th century stone structure not designed for military or commercial use, but rumored to be a tomb sealing a gateway to hell. A bottomless pit in the castle courtyard, covered by a Gothic chapel, is said to be the source of supernatural screams and clawing from the abyss. Historically, Houska served as a plague patient prison, a dungeon, and during World War II, a Nazi occult research base. Abandoned since the 1960s, its cold hallways, spiral staircases, and chapel marked with ancient symbols draw in curious explorers, most of whom leave with an invisible terror. Houska is more than just a structure. It is a living mystery, where darkness seems to breathe from every stone. Horror and mystery. The Hell Pit. Legend claims the bottomless pit in the courtyard leads to the underworld, where demonic creatures once emerged, with clawing sounds and screams echoing from the void. Locals believe the pit still breathes, drawing in the souls of those who get too close. Prisoner spirits. In the 13th century, prisoners were thrown into the pit as test subjects, only to die in agony, claiming to have seen devils. Their spirits are said to remain trapped, appearing as dark silhouettes in the chapel or corridors. Occult experiments. The Nazis, who occupied Houska during World War II, are believed to have conducted summoning rituals there, leaving behind cryptic symbols and stories of soldiers going mad or vanishing. The entity Temnota, an ancient Slavic ritual, was disrupted when the castle was built, awakening Temnota, the darkness, a mind-controlling entity that causes hallucinations and drags victims toward the pit. Paranormal phenomena. Visitors report whispers from the pit, shadowy figures in the chapel, and sensations of being strangled. Electronic devices often fail, and nightmares of the pit and demonic figures haunt those who spend the night. Secrets beneath the Houska pit. Episode 1. The gate opens. Veronika, a 28-year-old historian with tightly tied brown hair, stood in front of Houska Castle's gate, a notebook in hand. She had come to study ancient Slavic rituals linked to the pit in the castle courtyard. Lukas, a 31-year-old photographer, adjusted his camera, his gaze curious yet skeptical. "Do you really believe in this gate to hell stuff, Veronika?" he asked with a smirk. Veronika, who grew up with Slavic tales of spirits, shrugged. "I believe in history. This pit existed before the castle was built, and no one's ever explained why." The local guide, an old man with worried eyes, warned, "Don't go near the pit. It doesn't like strangers." Veronika smiled, thinking it was just a tourist ploy, but a chill in the air as she stepped through the stone gate made her shiver. They entered the courtyard, where a Gothic chapel stood over the deep pit. Wind whistled through cracks in the stone, like faint whispers. Lukas raised his camera, but the battery suddenly died, despite being fully charged. "That's weird," he muttered, checking the device. Veronika led Lukas into the Gothic chapel, where the stone walls were covered with ancient symbols, some faded. Light from stained glass windows cast dancing shadows on the floor. "This is the heart of the legend," Veronika said, jotting notes on the symbols. She pointed to a deeply carved crescent mark surrounded by small circles. It resembles a Slavic ritual symbol, but something feels off. Lukas snapped photos, but the camera kept glitching. Some pictures showed a shadow behind Veronika, though no one else was there. "Did you hear that?" he asked, as a deep moan echoed from beneath the floor, as if from the pit outside. Veronika shook her head, but when she touched the crescent mark, a cold current surged through her, and blood trickled from her finger, though she hadn't been injured. Suddenly, the chapel doors slammed shut, and the light from the windows dimmed, as if the castle were swallowing them. "What's happening?" Lukas shouted, pulling at the door, but it wouldn't budge. Heart pounding, Veronika checked her finger and saw blood dripping to the floor, forming a tiny crescent shape. "I didn't cut myself. Why is there blood?" she whispered. Lukas turned on his flashlight, but the beam flickered and a shadowy figure in a cloak briefly appeared in the chapel's corner, then vanished. "Did you see that?" he asked, voice trembling. Veronika turned on her recorder, capturing a whisper in ancient Slavic, Temnota, Krev, darkness, blood. She shivered, realizing the crescent mark might be a gateway. "I think I triggered something," she said, staring at the symbol on the wall, now faintly glowing red. Lukas tried the door again, but the castle seemed to trap them inside. A low growl echoed from the pit outside, and the chapel floor vibrated slightly. "We need to get out of here," he said, but as they turned, a rusted dagger engraved with a crescent symbol lay on the altar, as if placed there on purpose. Night fell, and Veronika and Lukas were trapped in the chapel. The moans from the pit grew louder, like claws scraping stone. Veronika flipped through her notebook, recalling the legend of Temnota, a primordial Slavic entity sealed by blood. In a failed ritual, the crescent symbol, "It's connected to Temnota," she said tensely. Lukas checked his camera and found a photo from sunset showing a cloaked figure standing right behind Veronika, though no one had been there when he took it. "Veronika, we've done something wrong," he whispered, gripping the rusted dagger from the altar. A sharp screech came from the courtyard, followed by heavy footsteps, as if something inhuman were approaching. Veronika touched the crescent symbol again, and her blood soaked into it, making it glow red. A terrifying howl erupted, and the cloaked figure appeared again, glowing red eyes fixed on them. "Krev, blood," it whispered, then vanished. Veronika and Lukas ran into the castle courtyard, where the pit lay beneath the chapel. Moonlight lit up the pit's mouth, and black smoke rose, as if the pit were breathing. Veronika found an old scrap of paper nearby, notes from a Nazi soldier. "We tried to summon Temnota, but it demands blood. The crescent mark is the gate." She shivered, realizing she had accidentally opened the gate with her blood. Lukas, his eyes worried, pointed to the rusted dagger in his hand, now trembling, the crescent symbol on it glowing. "Veronika, we have to destroy it," he said. But a roar from the pit drowned out his voice. The cloaked figure appeared, standing at the pit's edge, and all the crescent symbols on the castle walls lit up. "We can't leave," Veronika whispered, feeling her blood being pulled toward the pit. Lukas grabbed her hand, voice firm. "We'll find a way to stop it." But as they turned back toward the chapel, the door slammed shut, and Temnota's whisper echoed, "Krev, Krev." Veronika and Lukas, now trapped inside Houska Castle, realized the crescent symbol and Veronika's blood had awakened Temnota, a dark entity that manipulates the castle. They decide to explore the chapel and the pit further, hoping to uncover clues about the sealing ritual. But the pit's moans and the cloaked figure grow more intense. Veronika begins to feel an eerie connection with Temnota, as if her blood belongs to the entity. A forgotten document in the chapel reveals the Nazis once attempted to summon Temnota, and a hidden ritual artifact within the castle might be the key to sealing it. As the fog thickens and the castle locks them in, they realize Houska doesn't intend to let them leave. Episode 2: Screams in the Night. A thick fog engulfed Houska Castle, hiding the moonlight and trapping Veronika and Lukas in the courtyard. The deep pit beneath the chapel emitted a low, scraping sound, like claws against stone. Veronika, clutching the rusted dagger etched with the crescent symbol, examined her finger, where blood still dripped even though there was no wound. "The castle doesn't want us to leave," she whispered, eyeing the stone walls, which now seemed to tremble slightly. Lukas tried to force open the main gate, then shook his head. "It's like it's welded shut," he said tensely, gripping his camera even though its battery had died. Whispers from the chapel echoed, mingled with ancient Slavic, "Krev, Krev, blood, blood." Veronika turned on her recorder and captured the sound, but when she played it back, it became a scream. "Temnota." Lukas turned pale. "What exactly did you do when you touched that symbol?" A cloaked figure briefly appeared near the pit, then vanished. Veronika shivered, tightening her grip on the dagger. "We have to go back to the chapel. There might be a clue there," she said, her heart pounding. Inside the Gothic chapel, light from the stained glass windows flickered, casting dancing shadows on the crescent-marked walls. Veronika inspected the altar and discovered a hidden stone crevice containing a bundle of old documents, bound in leather carved with the crescent mark. "These are Nazi documents," she whispered, flipping to the first page and reading the handwritten line. "Temnota Summoning Experiment, June 1943. The pit is the gate. Blood is the key." Lukas raised his flashlight, but its beam flickered, and a deep hiss echoed from the pit outside. "They tried to summon something," he muttered, his voice shaking. A cloaked figure appeared in the chapel corner, glowing red eyes piercing the dark, then vanished again. Veronika felt icy cold, as if someone were breathing down her neck. "I think Temnota had already been awakened," she said, staring at the crescent symbol now faintly glowing red. Suddenly, Veronika's recorder turned on by itself, playing back a whisper, "Krev Tavaja, your blood." She flinched, dropping the documents, and blood from her finger dripped to the floor, forming a small crescent symbol. Lukas reviewed his photos and found one taken inside the chapel, showing a cloaked figure standing directly behind Veronika, though no one had been there when he took it. "Veronika, it's watching us," he whispered, stepping back. But as he spoke, his eyes briefly glowed red, and he muttered, "Blood, it needs blood." Veronika froze, realizing Temnota might be controlling him. "Lukas, are you okay?" she asked, gripping the rusted dagger tightly. Before he could answer, another dagger, identical to the one she held, fell from the chapel ceiling. It stabbed into the floor right in front of Veronika, and blood from her finger began to pour. More rapidly, as if drawn to the mark. A scream erupted from the pit, and all the crescent symbols on the walls glowed red, as if the castle itself were waking. Veronika tried to pull Lukas out of the chapel, but the doors slammed shut. The cloaked figure appeared, blocking the exit. "Krev," it whispered, voice like a frozen wind. Veronika and Lukas fled back into the courtyard, but thick fog prevented any escape. Veronika flipped through the Nazi documents again, finding a line. Temnota is not a spirit. It is an ancient darkness that lives in the pit. The blood of one linked to the Slavic ritual opens the gate. She shivered, recalling that her ancestors had participated in Slavic ceremonies in the region. "I might be the target," she whispered, staring at the blood on her finger. Lukas, eyes darting, murmured, "I can hear it in my head." He clutched the rusted dagger, but Veronika yanked it from him, afraid he was under Temnota's influence. A terrifying scream came from the pit, and black smoke rose, forming the ghostly shape of the cloaked figure. "Krev Tavaja," it roared. Lukas collapsed, clutching his head, screaming, "It wants your blood." Veronika helped him up, but the crescent symbols on the castle walls glowed brightly, and the ground shook, as if the pit itself were calling to them. Veronika and Lukas returned to the chapel, determined to break the curse. Veronika checked the altar again and found a small object, a carved stone bearing the crescent symbol hidden in a crevice. "This might be the ritual vessel," she said, but as she touched it, blood from her fingers seeped into the stone, and a scream from the pit drowned out all sound. The cloaked figure reappeared, glowing red eyes pointing at Veronika. "Krev Tavaja," it whispered, then vanished. Though weakened, Lukas stood protectively in front of her, holding the rusted dagger. "Veronika, we have to find a way to seal it," he said, but his eyes briefly glowed red, as if Temnota had already latched onto him. A screech rang out from the pit, and the chapel walls shook violently, as though the castle were furious. Veronika clutched the stone, feeling it heat up, as if drawing blood from her. "We have to figure out what this ritual is," she said, voice firm despite the rising fear. Still trapped inside Houska Castle, Veronika and Lukas realized that the carved stone marked with the crescent symbol was a conduit for Temnota, and Veronika's blood, tied to ancient Slavic rituals, was the key to either opening or sealing the gate. They resolved to explore deeper into the chapel and the abyss, uncovering Nazi documents that revealed a failed ritual had summoned Temnota, and that Veronika's blood might be the only way to seal it again. But as Lukas became increasingly possessed, and the cloaked figure and pit screams grew more violent, they realized the castle was turning them into part of the curse. A secret passage beneath the chapel, mentioned in the documents, became their next goal, but Temnota is waiting. Episode 3: The Bottomless Pit. A dense fog surrounded Houska Castle, locking Veronika and Lukas inside the Gothic chapel. Clutching the carved stone marked with the crescent symbol, Veronika read through the Nazi documents and spotted a line. The passage beneath the chapel leads to the ritual altar. Blood is the key. We have to find that passage, she said, her voice trembling as she looked at the blood on her finger, now spreading into a small crescent shape. Lukas, eyes flickering with unease, held the rusted dagger and muttered, "I hear it from the pit." Veronika grabbed his arm, afraid Temnota was manipulating him. She inspected the altar and found a loose stone etched with the crescent mark. When she touched it, blood from her fingers soaked into the stone, and the floor began to tremble, revealing a stone staircase descending into a dark corridor that a low growl echoed from the courtyard pit, and the cloaked figure appeared briefly at the chapel entrance, glowing red eyes fixed on them. "Crev, blood," it whispered, and vanished. Veronika and Lukas descended the stairs, her flashlight flickering, the air cold and reeking of damp earth and blood. The secret corridor was narrow, its stone walls carved with crescent symbols, some stained a deep, dried red. Veronika raised her flashlight, revealing ancient Slavic inscriptions. "Temnota lives in the pit. The blood of the chosen seals it." She shuddered, remembering her ancestors' involvement in local Slavic rituals. "I might be Temnota's target," she whispered, voice shaking as they ventured deeper. Veronika became dizzy and fell into a vivid vision. She stood in the castle courtyard of the 13th century, watching prisoners being thrown into the pit. One screamed, "The demon! It's pulling me!" before vanishing. She snapped awake, gasping, to find Lukas staring at her, his eyes briefly glowing red. "Veronika, you were mumbling something like them," he said tensely. She checked her finger. Blood was now flowing freely, soaking into the stone in her hand, causing the crescent to glow crimson. A howl rose from the pit, and the corridor trembled violently, as if the castle itself was angry. Lukas tried to stay calm and scan the corridor, but Veronika's flashlight went dark. A cloaked figure appeared at the far end, red eyes glowing, and another rusted dagger dropped from the ceiling, embedding itself at her feet. "Crev Tavaja, your blood." The figure roared and disappeared. Veronika screamed, dropping the stone, and blood from her fingers splattered onto the floor, forming yet another crescent symbol. The corridor walls quaked, and ghostly figures of 13th century prisoners emerged, twisted faces pointing at Veronika. Lukas swung the rusted dagger at one, but it dissolved into black smoke, then reformed. "They're not normal spirits," he shouted, backing away. Veronika grabbed the stone again, feeling it heat up, as if feeding on her blood. Suddenly, Lukas collapsed, clutching his head, mumbling, "Blood. Temnota needs blood." Veronika pulled him up, but his eyes flashed red. Temnota was inside him. Veronika and Lukas found a small chamber within the corridor, filled with more Nazi documents and a stone altar carved with crescent symbols. One file read, "Experiment 1943. Temnota demands the blood of those tied to Slavic heritage." A failed ritual opened the gate. Veronika's hands trembled. Her ancestors might have been part of the original sealing ritual. They tried to summon Temnota, but failed, she whispered. Lukas, visibly disturbed, muttered, "I see them in my mind." He pointed to the altar, where a new object, A silver ring engraved with the crescent lay buried in dust. When Veronika touched it, her blood soaked into the ring, and a piercing scream echoed from the pit outside. The cloaked figure materialized on the altar, whispering, "Krev Tavaja." Veronika recoiled, dropping the ring as the walls shook. Temnota was closing in. Lukas rushed forward with the dagger, but the figure vanished, leaving only a chilling laugh behind. "Veronika, we have to stop it," he cried, but his voice was now distorted, laced with Temnota's hiss. Holding both the carved stone and the silver ring, Veronika realized they were conduits for Temnota, and her blood was the key. From memory, she whispered an ancient Slavic incantation, "Krvi Uzima, Temnota Spava," by blood, the darkness sleeps. But as her blood dripped onto the silver ring, the corridor shook violently, and black smoke erupted from the floor, forming the cloaked figure once again. "You cannot seal me," it bellowed, eyes blazing red, despite being overtaken. Lukas stepped in front of Veronika, dagger raised. "Run, Veronika," he shouted, but the smoke wrapped around him and dragged him to the ground, tears streaming down her face. Veronika pulled him back toward the chapel, but the crescent symbols on the walls glowed brightly, and the pits. Screams drowned out all sound. She realized the ritual had to be completed inside the chapel, where the pit was closest. Having escaped the hidden corridor, Veronika and Lukas discovered that the carved stone and silver ring were the main conduits for Temnota, and Veronika's Slavic blood was the only key to either sealing or fully unleashing the entity. The Nazi documents revealed that the final ritual must take place within the chapel, near the pit, but would require Veronika's complete blood sacrifice. As Lukas fell further under Temnota's control, and Veronika was haunted by visions of prisoners being cast into the pit, a secret altar in the chapel became their next destination. But Temnota summoned spectral prisoners and Nazi soldiers, drawing them into a desperate battle for survival in the living shadow of Houska Castle. Episode 4: The Doctor's Spirit. Veronika and Lukas trembled inside the Gothic chapel of Houska Castle, clutching the stone and silver ring marked with crescent symbols. A thick fog outside sealed them in, and the deep pit's wail echoed like a curse. Veronika flipped through the Nazi documents, reading, "The altar within the chapel is the center of the ritual. The blood of the chosen one will either seal or unleash Temnota. We need to find that altar," she said, voice trembling, as she checked her bleeding finger, where the blood had formed a small crescent. Lukas, eyes flickering red, gripped the rusted dagger etched with the crescent. "I feel it in my head," he muttered, his voice laced with hissing undertones. Fearing Temnota had taken control, Veronika inspected the main altar and found a stone slab engraved with the symbol. When she touched it, her blood soaked in and the floor shook, revealing a hidden compartment containing an old notebook. Its cover marked with a crescent. A deep moan rose from the pit outside, and the cloaked figure briefly appeared, red eyes glowing. "Krev Tavaja, your blood," it whispered, then vanished. Veronika opened the notebook, finding handwritten notes from a Nazi doctor dated 1943. "We summon Temnota, but it demands blood. I see it in my dreams, pulling me into the pit." She shuddered, recalling the legend of a chief doctor who committed suicide by leaping from Houska's bell tower. They tried using a Slavic ritual, but failed. She muttered that as she read, a vivid dream overtook her. She stood in the castle courtyard, watching a man in a white lab coat with a twisted face leap from the tower. "Krev!" he screamed, before plunging into the pit. She awoke, gasping. Lukas was staring at her, eyes glowing red. "Veronika, you said something like him," he whispered. Blood now streamed from her finger, soaking into the carved stone, making the crescent symbol glow red. A moan echoed from the pit, and the chapel trembled, as if Temnota were enraged. "That doctor, he might still be here," she whispered, watching the cloaked figure reappear, this time wearing a white coat, red eyes ablaze. Lukas suddenly collapsed, clutching his head, mumbling, "Blood, it needs your blood." Veronika helped him up, but he raised the rusted dagger, eyes glowing. "Veronika, run!" he screamed, his voice twisted with Temnota's growl. She dodged and backed away, clutching the stone and the silver ring. "Lukas, fight it!" she shouted, but the doctor's specter appeared atop the altar, whispering, "Krev Tavaja." The chapel walls shook, and ghostly figures of 13th century prisoners and Nazi soldiers emerged, their twisted faces pointing at Veronika. Another rusted dagger dropped from the ceiling, embedding itself in the floor as blood gushed from her finger, seemingly drawn to the crescent. Lukas charged with his dagger raised, but Veronika shoved him aside and pulled him out of the chapel. The pit's roar drowned out all sound, and black smoke rose from the floor, forming the doctor's ghost, red eyes burning. "You cannot escape," it growled. Lukas screamed, clutching his head, Temnota burrowing deeper. Dragging Lukas into a corridor near the chapel, Veronika flipped through the doctor's notebook again. One page read, "The Slavic ritual demands the blood of one tied to this land. Temnota will not sleep unless the blood is fully sacrificed." She trembled, realizing her ancestors had once performed rituals in Houska. "I'm the target," she whispered, staring at the blood on her finger, now a fully formed crescent. Lukas regained clarity momentarily and held her hand. "Veronika, don't let it take you," he said, voice shaky, eyes flickering red. A ghostly Nazi soldier appeared, tattered uniform barely clinging to him, pointing at Veronika. "Krev!" It bellowed, then dissolved into black smoke. Veronika picked up the silver ring. It burned hot in her hand, as though drawing her blood. She recited an old Slavic incantation from memory. "Krvi Uzima, Temnota Spava." By blood, the darkness sleeps. But as her blood dripped onto the ring, the chapel shook again, and the doctor's specter reappeared on the altar, laughing coldly. "Your blood is not enough," it growled. Clutching the stone and silver ring, Veronika drove them into the altar, her blood soaking into the crescent symbol. A flash of white light burst forth, repelling the ghostly prisoners and soldiers, but the doctor's figure remained, eyes still glowing. "You cannot seal me," it roared, as black smoke wrapped around Lukas and slammed him to the ground. Veronika screamed and recited the chant louder. Krvi Uzima, Temnota Spava. Blood poured from her finger into the altar in a second. Blast of light partially disintegrated the doctor's form. But through the doctor's voice, Temnota laughed. The ritual is incomplete. Lukas, regaining control, lunged into the black smoke, slashing with the dagger, but it passed through harmlessly. The chapel began to collapse, stones falling from the ceiling as if the castle wanted to bury them alive. Veronika pulled Lukas out, but the doctor's ghost blocked the exit, whispering, Krev Tavaja. She realized the ritual had to be completed near the pit, Temnota's source of power. Having escaped the chapel, Veronika and Lukas now understood that the ritual to seal Temnota had to be performed near the pit in the castle courtyard, where the gateway to hell lay open. The carved stone and silver ring were the primary conduits, but Veronika's Slavic blood was the key and possibly required her life. Lukas, increasingly overtaken by Temnota, had become a greater danger. Meanwhile, Veronika's dreams of the Nazi doctor and fallen prisoners suggested Temnota was manipulating her through her blood. A clue in the doctor's notebook revealed that a third ritual artifact hidden near the pit was needed to complete the rite. But Temnota, summoning ghostly prisoners, Nazi soldiers, and the doctor's spirit, was ready to drag them into a final battle in the shadow of Houska Castle. Episode 5: The Blood Ritual. Shivering in Houska Castle's courtyard, Veronika and Lukas stood near the bottomless pit, its low, scraping moans echoing like claws on stone. A dense fog enclosed them, sealing them inside. Veronika clutched the carved stone and silver ring, with crescent engravings, rereading the Nazi doctor's notebook. The ritual to seal Temnota must be done at the pit. The final item lies beneath the altar near the pit. We have to find it, she said firmly, though blood from her fingers still dripped in a crescent shape. Lukas, eyes glowing red, gripped the rusted dagger. Veronika, I can't control it, he whispered, his voice merging with Temnota's hiss. She placed a hand on his shoulder, trying to pull him away from its grip. Lukas, we have to try. She found a small stone altar beside the pit, engraved with a crescent, and pried it open, revealing a wooden box containing a silver pendant with a deeply carved crescent. A horrifying scream rose from the pit, and the Nazi doctor's specter appeared atop it, red eyes glowing. Krev Tavaja, your blood, it whispered, then vanished. Veronika arranged a circle of candles around the altar near the pit, placing the stone, the ring, and the pendant upon it. She recited the ancient Slavic incantation, Krvi Uzima, Temnota Spava. By blood, the darkness sleeps. Cutting her finger, she let the blood drip onto the pendant. Immediately, a vivid dream overtook her. She stood in the courtyard, watching the Nazi doctor drill into a prisoner's skull, muttering, Temnota will live. The prisoner screamed as blood formed a crescent, then was dragged into the pit. She woke up gasping. Lukas was staring, red-eyed. Veronika, you were speaking like the doctor, he muttered, clutching the dagger tightly. She checked her finger. The blood now flowed faster, soaking into the pendant and making its crescent glow red. I think my ancestors were part of the original sealing ritual," she whispered. The pit's howls grew more violent, and the fog thickened, as if the castle itself was enraged. The doctor's ghost appeared again atop the altar, whispering, "Krev Tavaja." Lukas suddenly collapsed, clutching his head and screaming, "Blood! Temnota needs your blood." Veronika rushed to help, but he pushed her back and raised the dagger. "Veronika, run!" he shouted, his voice warped by Temnota's growl. She dodged, cradling the pendant, as ghostly 13th century prisoners and Nazi soldiers appeared, twisted faces encircling her. Another rusted dagger fell from above, embedding itself in the ground beside Veronika. Blood from her finger flowed toward the pit, as if being drawn. She cried out and repeated the incantation, "Krvi Uzima, Temnota Spava." A white flash burst from the pendant, momentarily repelling the spirits, but Lukas charged again, dagger raised. "I can't stop it," he screamed, eyes glowing. Veronika shoved him back, dragging him away, but the doctor's specter reappeared on the altar, grinning coldly. "Your blood will open the gate," it roared as black smoke surged from the pit and wrapped around Lukas. Panicked but determined, Veronika continued the ritual. She placed the stone, ring, and pendant on the altar near the pit and sliced her palm deeper, letting blood flow over the conduits. "Krvi Uzima, Temnota Spava," she cried. A blast of white light erupted, disintegrating the spectral prisoners and soldiers, but the doctor's ghost remained, eyes burning red. "You cannot seal me," it snarled, and black smoke from the pit coiled around Veronika, making her blood boil. Lukas, briefly lucid, lunged into the smoke, swinging the rusted dagger, but it passed through harmlessly. "Veronika, keep going," he shouted, but the smoke dragged him down, blood spilling from reopened wounds. Tears streaming, Veronika recited the chant one final time, her blood soaking the altar. As a monstrous wail rose from the pit, Temnota's rage unleashed, but the doctor's ghost only laughed. "Your blood is not enough." The spirits reformed, lunging at Veronika, clawing her arms, forcing more blood to pour forth. Exhausted, Veronika gripped the pendant and stabbed it into the altar. Blood streamed from her hand into the crescent, triggering a second explosion of white light that pushed back the spirits. But then Temnota fully manifested through the doctor's body, towering, twisted, monstrous. "Krev Tavaja," it bellowed, and the pit trembled as though the gate to hell was opening. Though weakened, Lukas stepped in front of Veronika, dagger raised. "Veronika, run," he cried. But black smoke coiled around him, dragging him toward the pit. Veronika, sobbing, pulled him back, but the ground quaked, and stones from the chapel roof crashed down as if the castle itself wanted to bury them. Veronika held Lukas close and ran toward the courtyard exit, but the doctor's ghost blocked the path, whispering, "You cannot escape." She realized the ritual demanded her full sacrifice, and the pit was the place where it must be completed. Though they escaped the courtyard, Veronika and Lukas realized the folk ritual had only weakened Temnota, it had not sealed it. The carved stone, silver ring, and pendant were the key conduits, But Veronika's Slavic blood had to be fully sacrificed inside the pit to close the gate. Lukas, increasingly possessed, became more of a threat, while Veronika's dreams of the doctor and the prisoners confirmed she was the key to the curse. A new passage in the doctor's notebook revealed that another altar, hidden deep within the pit, was the site of the final sealing. But Temnota, summoning ghosts of prisoners, Nazi soldiers, and the doctor, was preparing to drag them into the shadows of Houska, where the pit awaited Veronika's blood. Episode 6: Beneath the Shadow of the Black Pit. Veronika stood before the bottomless pit in Houska Castle's courtyard, the screams from within scraping against her mind like claws. The dense fog sealed her and Lukas in darkness. Clutching the carved stone, silver ring, and crescent pendant, she flipped through the Nazi doctor's journal and found a line. The altar within the pit is the heart of Temnota. Only the chosen one's blood can seal it. We have to go down, she whispered, as blood from her finger dripped endlessly. Forming a crescent on the pendant, Lukas, eyes glowing red, gripped the rusted dagger. "Veronika, it's inside me," he muttered, his voice twisted with Temnota's hiss. She tied a rope around her waist, preparing to descend, but a horrific scream rose from the pit, and the doctor's blood-soaked ghost appeared on the edge. "Krev Tavaja, your blood," it whispered with glowing red eyes, then vanished. Veronika shuddered but grabbed Lukas's hand and pulled him into the pit, the icy air swallowing them. They climbed down into the pit, Veronika's flashlight flickering across stone walls etched with crescent symbols, some smeared with dried blood. The air was thick with dampness and death, suffocating her. When her feet touched the floor, a vivid dream flooded her mind. She stood in the pit in the 13th century, watching a prisoner fall. His twisted face screamed, "Temnota, it's pulling me," as he grabbed her hand, blood spilling from his eyes. "You are part of it," he whispered. She snapped awake, heart pounding, to find Lukas watching her, his eyes red, hand clenching the dagger. "Veronika, you were speaking like them," he whispered, trembling. She checked her finger, blood now streamed onto the pendant, causing the crescent to glow crimson. "My ancestors sealed Temnota," she whispered, realizing her blood was the key. A wail rose from deeper within the pit, and the doctor's ghost appeared in front of a stone altar, whispering, "Krev Tavaja." Lukas suddenly collapsed, clutching his head and screaming, "It wants your blood." Veronika tried to help, but he pushed her back and raised the dagger, eyes ablaze. "Veronika, I can't stop it," he screamed, voice blending with Temnota's. Screech. She dodged, clutching the pendant, as ghostly prisoners and Nazi soldiers rose from the black mist, their deformed faces clawing at her. Drawing blood, Veronika chanted the ancient incantation, "Krvi Uzima, Temnota Spava." By blood, the darkness sleeps. Lukas, briefly regaining control, lunged at a soldier's ghost with the dagger. It dissipated into smoke, but reformed. "Veronika, do it," he yelled, before black mist wrapped around him and pulled him toward the altar. She cried out, "Lukas," but he turned, red-eyed, whispering, "Your blood is everything." He raised the dagger, then trembled, resisting Temnota. Tears ran down Veronika's face as she realized Lukas was sacrificing his will to protect her. She drove the pendant into the altar, her blood soaking into the crescent symbol. A burst of white light pushed the spirits back temporarily. Veronika placed the carved stone and silver ring on the altar and chanted louder. Krvi Uzima, Temnota Spava. Blood poured from her hand into the altar. A second blast of white light erupted, causing the doctor's ghost to scream and partially dissolve. But Temnota, speaking through him, laughed coldly. "Your blood is not enough." Black mist rose, forming a towering figure with a twisted face and glowing red eyes. The pit itself seemed to be its heart. Veronika felt her blood draining, and the dream of the doctor returned, whispering, "You belong to Temnota." She resisted, reciting the incantation again, but ghostly prisoners and soldiers swarmed her, tearing into her shoulder and drawing more blood. The pit shook violently, and stones fell from above as if the gateway to hell were opening wider. Lukas, using the last of his strength, charged into the black mist, slashing at Temnota with the rusted dagger. "Seal it, Veronika," he cried before, being consumed by the mist, his blood spilling across the altar. Exhausted, Veronika stabbed the stone, ring, and pendant into the altar. Blood streamed from her hands, pooling into the crescent symbol. A massive explosion of white light shattered the shadows. The ghostly doctor screamed as he vanished. But Temnota, in his voice, whispered, "The ritual is incomplete." The pit trembled harder, and Veronika felt her body weaken, as if her soul was being pulled into darkness. She gripped the rope and began to climb out, but the doctor's figure reappeared, blocking her exit. "Krev Tavaja," he whispered. Clutching the pendant, Veronika ran back to the chapel. The crescent symbols on the walls glowed red, and the castle shook as if Temnota was summoning its final strength. She looked at her hand and saw a faint crescent burned into her skin. Temnota had marked her. After escaping the pit, Veronika realized the folk ritual only weakened Temnota. It hadn't sealed it. The carved stone, silver ring, and pendant remained the main conduits, but Veronika's Slavic blood must be fully sacrificed inside the pit to complete the sealing, possibly at the cost of her life. Lukas, who sacrificed himself to protect her, had been consumed by the pit, but his whispers still echoed from below, suggesting Temnota hadn't released him. Veronika's visions of the doctor and the prisoners intensified, and the crescent mark on her hand showed she had become part of the curse. A final clue in the notebook revealed that the ritual must be completed using all three conduits at the altar within the pit. But Temnota, summoning the doctor and the cursed souls, prepared to drag Veronika into the eternal darkness of Houska Castle. Episode 7: Blood and the Mark. Veronika stood once more in the courtyard of Houska Castle before the abyss. The screams from deep within echoed like a living curse. A thick fog encased her, locking her in. She clutched the carved stone, silver ring, and crescent pendant, and reread the final line in the Nazi doctor's notebook. The ritual must be completed at the altar within the pit. The chosen one's blood must be fully sacrificed. The crescent on her hand throbbed, blood oozing from it, as if Temnota was calling. She tied the rope around her waist, ready to descend, but a vivid dream overtook her. She saw Lukas, pale-faced, standing in the pit. "Veronika, I'm here, but it has me," he whispered. She awoke with a jolt, heart racing, realizing Lukas might still be alive. A terrifying scream erupted from the pit and the Nazi doctors. Blood-soaked figure appeared at its edge. "Krev Tavaja, your blood," it whispered, then vanished. Trembling, Veronika climbed into the pit, the freezing air pressing in like jaws ready to consume her. The pit was suffocatingly dark, lit only by the weak beam of Veronika's flashlight. Crescent symbols and dried blood coated the walls. The air stank of decay. When she reached the bottom, another dream consumed her. Lukas stood wrapped in black. Smoke before the altar, his eyes glowing red. "Veronika, run. It's going to take you," he whispered, but his voice twisted into Temnota's hiss. A 13th century prisoner with a twisted face grabbed her wrist and whispered, "Your blood belongs to it." She woke gasping, her hand burning. The crescent mark on her palm glowed red, and blood streamed down to the pendant, soaking it. "Lukas, you're still here," she whispered, realizing Temnota was using him to lure her in. She approached the stone altar, etched with the crescent, when the doctor's figure appeared atop it, whispering, "Krev Tavaja." Her blood seemed to boil, as though Temnota was feeding off her life force. Veronika placed the carved stone, silver ring, and pendant on the altar and began the ancient Slavic chant, "Krvi Uzima, Temnota Spava." By blood, the darkness sleeps. She sliced her hand and let her blood drip onto the altar, but the pit quaked. Ghostly 13th century prisoners and Nazi soldiers rose from the black mist, twisted faces slashing her arms and shoulders, drawing more blood. Lukas appeared, his eyes glowing red, gripping the rusted dagger engraved with the crescent. "Veronika, your blood. I can't stop," he growled, his voice laced with Temnota's hiss. She dodged as he lunged, screaming, "Lukas, fight it!" For a moment, clarity flickered in his eyes. He hesitated, trembled, then stabbed his own hand. Blood dripped onto the altar. "Veronika, finish it," he yelled, before the black mist swallowed him deeper into the pit. Tears streaming, Veronika realized Lukas had sacrificed himself to give her a chance. She shouted the chant louder, her blood soaking into the altar. A burst of white light erupted, pushing the spirits back, if only temporarily. Exhausted, Veronika stabbed the pendant into the altar. Blood poured from her hand, pooling in the crescent groove. Another explosion of white light erupted, and the doctor's ghost howl, partially dissolving. But Temnota, speaking through him, laughed coldly. "Your blood is not enough." Black smoke surged upward from the pit, coalescing into a towering figure, twisted face, burning red eyes, as if the pit itself was its heart. Veronika felt herself growing weaker, her blood being drained. The dream of the doctor returned, whispering, "You belong to Temnota." She resisted, reciting the incantation again. "Krvi Uzima, Temnota Spava. The ghostly prisoners and soldiers lunged at her, slashing, but the altar's white glow pushed them back. The pit trembled violently, stones crashing from above, as if the gate to hell was widening. From deep within the pit, she heard Lukas's faint voice. "Veronika, seal it." She realized he was still alive, trapped but not gone. Veronika gripped the carved stone and silver ring, driving them into the altar. Blood from her hands surged, soaking the crescent symbol. A final explosion of light disintegrated the spirits, and the doctor's figure screamed, then vanished. But Temnota, still speaking through him, whispered, "The ritual is not complete." The pit shook violently. Veronika felt her soul pulled toward the void, the crescent on her hand now blazing red. She grabbed the rope and climbed, but near the top, Lukas's form appeared, eyes glowing red, blocking her escape. "Veronika, your blood," he whispered, voice twisted with Temnota's hiss. "Lukas, you're not it," she shouted. But black smoke wrapped around her, and the castle trembled as if to bury her alive. She ran back to the chapel, holding the conduits tight, realizing the ritual demanded her full blood sacrifice, and that Lukas might be the key to either her salvation or destruction. Having escaped the pit, Veronika knew the folk ritual had only weakened Temnota, it hadn't sealed it. The carved stone, silver ring, and crescent pendant were the core conduits, but Veronika's Slavic blood had to be fully sacrificed to complete the rite. Lukas remained alive but imprisoned by Temnota, and his red-eyed presence showed he was no longer fully himself. The crescent mark on Veronika's hand glowed brighter each day, signaling that she had become part of the curse. A final clue in. The doctor's notebook revealed that the ritual required not only the chosen's full blood, but also the voluntary sacrifice of another. Veronika must return to the pit to rescue Lukas and complete the ritual, but Temnota, summoning the doctor, prisoners, and Nazi soldiers, was ready to drag her into the eternal shadow of Houska Castle, where the gate to hell now yawns open. Episode 8: Light in the Darkness. Veronika stood before the bottomless pit in the courtyard of Houska Castle. Screams from the abyss echoed like a living curse. Dense fog surrounded her, trapping her within the castle walls. Clutching the carved stone, silver ring, and crescent pendant, she flipped through the Nazi doctor's notebook and saw the final line. The ritual to seal Temnota requires the blood of the chosen and a voluntary sacrifice at the altar within the pit. The crescent on her hand burned, blood oozing from it, as if Temnota was calling. She tied the rope around her waist, preparing for one final descent. But a vivid dream struck her. She saw Lukas, pale-faced, standing in the pit. "Veronika, save me." "But it wants you," he whispered. She woke with a jolt, heart pounding, realizing Lukas was the voluntary sacrifice, but Temnota was using him to lure her in. A chilling scream echoed, and the Nazi doctor's blood-stained figure appeared at the edge of the pit. "Krev Tavaja, your blood," it whispered, then vanished. Trembling, Veronika lowered herself into the pit, the freezing air closing in like jaws. The pit was pitch black. Veronica's flashlight flickered across blood-smeared stone walls etched with crescent marks. When she reached the bottom, she saw the stone altar where the ritual must be completed. Another vision surged, stronger than before. Lukas stood before the altar, wrapped in black smoke, his eyes glowing red. "Veronika, your blood will save me," he whispered. But his voice was twisted by Temnota's hiss. A 13th century prisoner with a contorted face grabbed her hand. "Your blood completes the gate," he whispered. Veronika jolted awake, panting, only to see Lukas truly standing at the altar, eyes burning red, gripping the rusted dagger etched with a crescent. "Veronika, do it," he murmured, but his voice mixed with Temnota's growl. She checked her palm. The crescent mark now glowed red, and blood flowed steadily, soaking the pendant. "Lukas, I'll save you," she whispered, but the doctor's figure appeared atop the altar, whispering again, "Krev Tavaja." Veronika placed the carved stone, silver ring, and crescent pendant on the altar, then recited the ancient Slavic incantation, Krvi Uzima, Temnota Spava. By blood, the darkness sleeps. She cut her hand deeper, letting her blood spill onto the altar, but Lukas lunged, rusted dagger raised. "Your blood," he shouted, eyes glowing crimson. She dodged, screaming, "Lukas, fight it!" For a moment, clarity flashed in his eyes, and he stabbed the dagger into his own hand. Blood poured onto the altar, mixing with hers. A white light burst forth, forcing back the ghostly prisoners and Nazi soldiers that had risen from the black mist. The doctor's spirit screamed as his form began to dissolve. But Temnota, through the doctor's voice, laughed coldly. "Your blood is not enough." Black smoke surged upward, forming a towering figure, twisted face, blazing red eyes. The pit trembled, and stones rained from the ceiling, as if Hell's Gate were opening wide. With tears streaming down her face, Veronika chanted louder, her and Lukas's blood pooling beneath the crescent symbol. Another explosion of white light shook the chamber. Temnota screamed, its form tearing apart. Temnota screamed as its body unraveled, and the ghosts of the prisoners, soldiers, and doctor vanished into black smoke. The pit fell silent. Veronika collapsed beside the altar, blood slowing from her hand. The crescent mark on her skin faded, but didn't disappear. Lukas, barely conscious, lay beside her, blood spreading across the stone. But his heart still beat. "Veronika, you did it," he whispered, voice faint. She pulled Lukas up by the rope and climbed out of the pit. But a faint whisper echoed from deep below, "Krev Tavaja." Veronika shivered as the ghostly image of the doctor flickered briefly, eyes glowing red, then vanished. She examined her hand. The crescent mark was faint but still there, as if Temnota hadn't fully vanished. Holding Lukas close, she pulled him into the courtyard. The castle trembled one last time, furious that its prey had escaped. Dawn broke over Houska Castle. Sunlight pierced the fog, shining onto the weathered stone walls. Veronika, carrying Lukas, brought him to a hospital in Prague, where he was saved, but left weakened. Back in her apartment, she kept the Nazi doctor's notebook and the now cracked crescent stone. She recorded everything in her journal, but each night, dreams returned, Lukas standing in the pit, whispering, "Krev Tavaja." In her mirror, the crescent mark had faded, but sometimes flickered red. One day, she received a package, no return address. Inside was a piece of cloth bearing the crescent symbol, identical to the ones from the pit. She slammed her journal shut, heart racing, as a faint whisper drifted through the room, like wind from the abyss. Veronika wondered, had the ritual truly sealed Temnota, or had it only suppressed it temporarily? She wrote the final line in her journal. Did I end the curse or become part of it? Veronika tried to return to normal life in Prague, but dreams of Lukas and the pit haunted her. Though he survived, Lukas was plagued by strange visions of Temnota, suggesting the entity still clung to him. One day, Veronika found a small stone in her apartment, its origin unknown, marked with a faint crescent. A whisper from the pit echoed in her mind, and the stone trembled when she touched it. Had Temnota truly been sealed, or had it merged with Veronika's blood, waiting for the right moment to rise again? The doctor's notebook, now hidden away, seemed to call to her. The crescent symbol continued to appear in her dreams, leaving only one chilling question. Would the curse of Houska ever truly end? The story ends here, but the mysteries still linger somewhere out there, hiding in the dark. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. If you felt a chill down your spine, don't forget to subscribe, turn on the bell, and share this story. We'll meet again in the next night with another mystery. Good night.